the Americans were, there were a lot of rumors, but nothing was ever confirmed. The Red Cross, I remember, showed up at one point and had some special rations for kids. I don't know what the rationale of the Germans was to let the Red Cross in, but a year before we got there, they made a film in Theresienstadt where they wanted to show the world that, yeah, it was no vacation to be in a camp, but we were living very well. They set up coffee houses, they opened up stores, they had a concert out on the square, and they made movies of that. Nobody from the regular inmates could talk to anyone that came on this Red Cross delegation. So they went back home to Switzerland and put out a report saying that, yeah, it's not so bad. So the Nazis used that as propaganda. They didn't know about the transports that left almost on a bi-weekly basis to go to Auschwitz to have the people gassed. Then on May 8th, the last day of the war in 1945, there were shots fired into Theresienstadt from the outside, from the street that was outside the walls. And I was up on the barracks buildings picking up weeds and things, and we heard some shots being fired. We heard bullets whistling by, but I don't know whether they were shooting at us or nobody got hit, fortunately. We went back home that day, and without any much ado, in the evening, all of a sudden, Russian trucks and tanks showed up in the square. And there was great jubilation because obviously the war was over and we had survived. We looked out on the street outside the ghetto walls, and whenever a German came by, especially SS, they got shot on the spot. So they were hiding, and they got their due eventually. Because of the typhoid that the prisoners from Buchenwald brought in, they established a quarantine in Theresienstadt for 6 weeks. Nobody could leave. But the food situation improved tremendously. The Russians brought in food, bread, and flour, so things really were looking up. I remember even we got strawberries to eat, which was unheard of during the war. I was standing on the street one time, and a Russian truck came by, and they had cut up bread loaves into pieces and threw them out for people to eat. And I caught a piece. I ate it on the spot. I didn't wait for my brother or my father or anyone else. So we had survived, fortunately. And after 6 weeks, then in June of 1945, we were able to leave Theresienstadt. Transportation was non-existent, and we had to fend for ourselves on horse-drawn carriages, some trucks, little pieces by train. And it took us 10 days to go to maybe 150 miles to get back to Wiesbaden for a happy reunion with our mother. She had stayed there, and a friend moved in with her, and we were very happy to be back together again, obviously. I remember we moved into an old Nazi's house whose wife was thrown out because of her husband's being an SS man. So we took over their apartment and lived there for a while until we came to the United States. My brother and I took private lessons because we missed 3 or 4 years of schooling. And as it turns out, the teacher who was giving us the lessons was a nice guy to us, but he was a Nazi who was fired from his school job because of his Nazi activities when they were still in power. But he was a good teacher. When we arrived in the United States, after a 10-day trip on the Marine Perch, we lived with the Hayas, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, for several weeks until they said, well, you have to be on your own now. And we found an apartment on Delancey Street in Lower Manhattan. I went to work immediately after we got to New York to support our family. I worked on repairing cameras and a long subway ride to go to and from work. So I finished my schooling. I went to high school and to City College of New York, all in the evenings. So it took me a little longer than the normal 4 years to get out of college. But I made it in June of 1954. I graduated as a mechanical engineer from City College and started to work as an engineer at the time. I met my wife, my love, Ruth, in 1960 when I moved to Massachusetts, and we married in 1961. Our children are Lisa and Mark. Lisa is married, and we have 2 grandchildren, 2 beautiful kids, a girl, Bela, and a boy named Asher. So looking back at it, it's obvious that I owe my survival to my parents.